Hello and welcome to another episode of Brit in Poland. I'm hoping my selfie stick survives this. I think I need a new and better one. Today I'm in Żoliborz, one of the, nicer districts of Warsaw. And I'm going to talk about a slightly more controversial subject for a change. And I'm curious to see what the responses are on this one. So I've taken notes. I'll try not to literally read them out. And I haven't perhaps structured this completely before I'm doing it, so it's a little bit impromptu, a little bit ad hoc. But today I'm going to talk about Tommy Robinson. And it's a subject that I was thinking about talking about for a while. And then last night I saw a quick report where Dominik Tarczyński actually went to visit Tommy in prison. And that was surprising for me, to see like a Polish MEP discuss to go and have an interview with someone who is perhaps one of the most divisive figures in the UK at the moment. And I thought it was very interesting what he said. He basically called Tommy a political prisoner and a freedom fighter. And so I thought, okay, let me try and present what I consider to be like a balanced account of who I think Tommy is. Of course, I've never met the guy, I've never had any personal dealings with him or any of his organizations really. But I certainly have watched a lot of his material, as in I've watched one of his documentaries. I've watched several interviews that he's done with various commentators, because much like most of the British public, we were kind of taught to believe that Tommy is like some kind of evil, far-right, racist, horrible person. You know, people say he's a criminal. People say that he can't be trusted, that he spreads hate. And this is very much the kind of dialogue you will see if you are seeing any coverage about him, say with the UK press or on the BBC, for example. So, you know, where most people get their information about the UK. You have to go to kind of, let's say, the more independent news to learn more of the story and to get more of a kind of a well-rounded take on the situation, because nothing is ever quite black and white. So we're going to go a bit through his history, and I'm going to share some of my views, and we'll take it from there. Oh, the selfie is so primitive. Anyway, so Tommy Robinson, as he is now known, he was born Stephen Yaxley Lemon in 1982 in a British town called Luton. Now, I've never been to Luton, at least I don't think I have. But one thing to note about Luton is it's perhaps one of the most ethnically diverse towns in the UK. So you have a large population of people from everywhere, pretty much. And so I don't know if white English is actually the minority in the city or not. I didn't look at the demographic figures, but let's say it's an interesting kind of mix of people. So when Tommy was growing up in school, he says himself, he had about sort of 50% white, 50% kind of ethnic friends. I think he says black, but presumably there are some other races mixed in. And one thing he found is that during his school years, he didn't really find that there was much like integration with people from the Muslim community in his schools, and it was one of those things that kind of was on the back of his mind, and something that he questioned, why there was this kind of difference and there was this distance with the people. And it kind of goes to explain a little bit about his methodology, a little bit about his way of thinking. Because one thing that's I should have mentioned at the beginning is the reason that Tommy is so controversial is he very much speaks out against, let's say, extreme Islam. Something which is a very hot topic in the UK. Whenever you discuss these sorts of things, it's very hard not to be labelled as some kind of far-right extremist or some kind of racist. So it's a controversial one for sure. This video isn't going to discuss Islam or Muslims or anything like that. I will just say very briefly that I have a mixed opinion. I have friends who are Muslim, and I see these people as very peaceful, very nice, but I've also seen the flip side. I've seen the terrorist attacks we have in the UK. I've seen the division in our culture. So again, nothing's black and white. You cannot say all Muslims are evil. You cannot say all Muslims are good. Like with anyone, you can't say all Christians are evil, all Christians are good. All Jews are evil, all Jews are good. You know, there's no such thing as an absolute. I'm sure you'd even find some evil Buddhists out there if you looked hard enough. But anyway, we're not here to discuss religion. We're here to discuss Tommy. So he was actually, he earned an apprenticeship in 1998. So I guess he would have been like 16, to be an engineer at the Luton Airport. So I think Tommy himself, he says that he's not much of a reader. He's not very academic. In fact, it's very fair to say that he is very kind of working class in the UK, because class is still a big thing in the UK. But he said that when he was in school, even though he didn't really pay attention in lessons, he was more of a class clown type guy. He normally did pretty well. He got like, you know, sort of B's and stuff like that in his grades, without really paying attention or trying. So it's fair to say that you cannot label Tommy Robinson as stupid. He actually has a pretty good mind on him. But obviously, I don't know the ins and outs, but when you hear him speak, he does come across as someone who's thought things through. But anyway, we'll get on to that. So one of the first, let's say, controversies that springs to mind is in 2004, he joined the BNP. He was with them for a year, so he left them in 2005. And the BNP was, again, one of those quite controversial movements in the UK, the British National Party. So it was very much seen as a kind of far-right, Britain first, anti-immigration party. And there may be some people that would dispute that and say that they, you know, were not as far-right as they're made out to be in the media. But that's the general rhetoric that is given. And I think one of the reasons he left is he felt that he couldn't quite further his agenda with this group, that maybe there were a few too many radicals in there, too many elements of what you would say are the genuine far right, so people that are very racist and very nationalistic in a negative way, because I think you can be nationalistic and a good person. So I don't think the terms are mutually exclusive. So he, had an incident in 2005 where he basically got arrested for assaulting a police officer. At least that's the general line that's given. It's quite interesting when you're researching Tommy Robinson, because if you put him into Google, pretty much all of the results that come back, you can tell have been written by people of a leftist mindset that are very anti-Tommy Robinson, because they don't really go into detail. They just list the facts without any of the context. And when you listen to, let's say, his rap sheet without any context, he sounds like a violent criminal, basically. But yeah, so from what I understand, him and his girlfriend were having an argument after being in a pub or a club or something like that. And this off-duty police officer steps in to basically try and get in the middle of things. He got a bit aggressive with Tommy. Tommy fought back. And when Tommy fought back, he used a bit of, let's say, excessive force. And that was effectively what he was charged for. So, yeah, that wasn't his finest hour for sure. But there was a bit of wrong on both sides. So to just say that he assaulted a police officer, well, it's kind of mislabeling the situation. In 2009 is when he started to adopt the pseudonym of Tommy Robinson. It wasn't his first one. I think he had 2 or 3. His first one was actually Wayne King, which, if you kind of say it phonetically, was meant very much as a joke. And one of the reasons that he adopted this pseudonym is, well, to be honest, he was starting to say a lot of controversial things about the, let's say, the Islamic community in the UK. He'd developed this kind of worry and anger about the situation, partly motivated, I believe, by his cousin being involved in one of the grooming gangs. So she was groomed. I don't know the full details of that story, and it's probably not appropriate to talk about it too much on YouTube. Yeah, so he created this fake name because he didn't want his parents to be targeted. He, I think, may have had a kid, or his wife was pregnant at this point, and he didn't want his family to be attacked, because speaking out against Islam in the UK can be a bit of a death sentence. You will be targeted by the community. And in fact, there are a few examples where he's been attacked, or his family's been attacked. And so, yeah, he says a lot of people label him a coward for using a fake name. But given the context of the situation, I can sort of see it. Obviously, it didn't stick because everyone knows who he is now. But I guess he was lower profile back then. This is the weird thing. Like, the name Tommy Robinson is actually based on a football hooligan. So I'm not entirely sure why he picked that name, if there was a specific political reason for that, or if he was just having a bit of fun, or if it was someone he admired. Who can say? So in 2011, he founded or co-founded a group called the EDL, and this is the English Defence League. So this was pretty much founded in the name of combating jihadism, extreme Islam. And again, the media will paint this very much like the BNP, as like a kind of a far-right organization which spreads hatred and disharmony in the community. And he would host a number of rallies with the EDL, like in defense of British troops returning from Afghanistan, for example, who were targeted by the Muslim community in Luton. His rallies would become a bit more national. He would get a bit more, let's say, international recognition as kind of a figure on the right. So a kind of Geert Wilders type, you could say. So he had this kind of association. And then he picks up another like conviction, this time like a community order sentence, because apparently he and about 100 lads were involved in some kind of football hooliganism scuffle. I don't know the details on that one, so I can't defend it. And it does sound like it was pretty nasty if he got like a 12-month conviction. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, one thing that like Tommy himself will say is he does have a troubled background. He's certainly no angel. But this was, I guess, like when he was in his 20s. So he was a bit of a more mature figure these days, and he has changed a lot about himself. He has grown up. But yes, let's continue. So, yeah, around this time he was assaulted. Three Asian men, as he describes them, jumped out of a car and went on an attack. And he was basically saved by a kind of good Samaritan figure. And that was, a kind of a good illustration of the kind of dangers that he was in for saying what he was saying. But he, I thought this was funny. He held a protest on the rooftop of the FIFA headquarters after the England team were banned from wearing the remembrance poppy as a symbol during World Cup or something like that. I hate FIFA. I think they're a corrupt organisation. I mean, why else would the World Cup have gone to Qatar? But anyway, yeah, I thought that was quite a funny one. In 2012, he attended counter-jihad events throughout Europe, so in Denmark, Sweden, and Belgium, with various organisations there. So I guess he was like a kind of a speaker at these events. And he would leave the EDL in 2013. Again, he felt that he kind of did what he could with that organisation. A lot of people, again, say that it was full of Nazis and full of like far-right types. But actually, when you look into previous videos of the time, you see him burning the swastika flag, denouncing Nazism, and saying that those people would never be welcome in his party. And I believe he did work very hard to remove people who were aggressive and violent and with those kind of ideologies. So I don't believe personally that he has any of those sentiments himself. And I think this is just what the media like to portray him as. So I think it was around this time also that he took a trip to Israel. I remember seeing a video where he was talking about that. And he actually snuck into the area where several Gazans were living, and he was talking to them about their beliefs, about their thoughts on Israelis and the general situation. He kind of snuck into the Gaza Strip and was quickly escorted out by the IDF because, well, he was in severe risk of being killed. And I think it was this incident in his life, this choice of his to go and visit Israel, that kind of founded a lot of his thoughts on Jewish people, because he's a very staunch defender of Israel, so very much a Zionist, and he's a defender of the Jewish people, and his rallies, and he's attended rallies to do this and got in trouble for that. It was also about this time when he got another conviction. Tommy. So he basically he was invited to speak at some conference in the US. I don't know the exact details, but I think it was kind of like a right-leaning conservative type conference. And the problem is he was banned from traveling to the US. And I can't remember if it was like a political decision or if it was because of his like criminal convictions, but effectively he wasn't allowed to enter the US. So he borrowed a friend's passport and got into the US that way. I'm kind of amazed that that worked. But when he got back to the UK, he was convicted for that because, of course, identity fraud is a big no-no. And so, yes, I think he went back to prison for a spell as a result of that. The next one, I don't know a lot about, but I heard bits and pieces. So in 2014, he basically got jailed for mortgage fraud. And I've been trying to dig into this one. And from the best I can understand of what happened at the time, he had a very high police profile. And one of the things to know about Tommy Robinson is he is a target of the police. You know, he is very much like an enemy of the state, as it were. And at the time, they were kind of digging through all of his records to see, right, what has he done wrong? What can we convict him with? And there was some incident where he'd lent some money to his brother to help his brother buy a house. And as I say, I don't know the full details, but I guess it kind of counts as mortgage fraud because you should declare your own money when purchasing property. I don't know. Maybe somebody who knows the story better can add that detail into the comments. But that's, yeah, that was another conviction that you picked up. But in the same year, he spoke at the Oxford Union. And I do recommend, there is a video of it on YouTube. It's about a 45-minute to an hour speech where he basically talks about his life story and he talks about the cause that he's fighting, and he raises like all of the issues he was seeing in like the local council, in the local community, about these kind of extremist Islamic groups that were like heavily involved in kind of Luton, and of course the grooming gangs and all of the horrible things that have been going on, and with a lot of his personal stories. And he included a lot of video clips as well, which is quite interesting for an Oxford Union speech. So that was very interesting to watch, actually. I do recommend you check that out. So in 2015, he got involved with a group called Pegida. I forget what it stands for, but it was a kind of like German initiative, and he was trying to kind of start a UK chapter. And I don't think it really took off. But again, I think it's one of these like anti-Islamic kind of foundations, effectively. I don't even know if it still exists now. I, again, don't know a lot about it, but it was quite a big organization. 2017, he kind of leaves the UK for a time, sort of, because he goes to work in Canada. And he works for well, I don't know if he was actually working in Canada, but I think he visited several times. But he goes to work with a news outlet there, branded a far-right Canadian news outlet. I don't know what a far-right Canadian looks like. And it was with this chap, Ezra Levant, who is one of his kind of big supporters now. And so he would basically work as a kind of a UK correspondent for this channel. And I've seen some interviews with Ezra talking about him and saying that he was someone that they couldn't really control, someone that they were often trying to get like legal support for. And it was, I think they enjoyed working together, but it was like ultimately more trouble than it could work out to be. So he ended up leaving that organization after attending a few events and getting into more legal trouble. Yeah, because yeah, we get into his next conviction history. So he received an 18-month suspended sentence for reporting outside of a court that was involved in a grooming gang trial, and yeah, he faced jail again, this time for contempt of court related to, I think, disrupting this trial and reporting on stuff he wasn't supposed to report on. People say he endangered the case, but from what I understand, he was attending he was outside for the sentencing hearing, so when the case had basically finished already. He was linked with this chap called Darren Osborne, who was involved in an attack. So Darren Osborne, he was far right. I don't know a lot of details, but apparently he took a van and he decided to drive into a crowd outside of a mosque. And he cited Tommy Robinson. I think there may have been some kind of correspondence. Of course, I don't think Tommy was inciting anything, as in he wasn't telling him to do anything. He was, always advocating kind of peaceful political routes. But yeah, so this is where that ended up. And because of his communications with Tommy and his quoting of Tommy in some kind of manifesto or letter, of course, it doesn't look good on Tommy, does it? In the same year, so 2017, he was appointed as an advisor about grooming gangs to UKIP. UKIP, or the United Kingdom Independence Party. They were effectively one of the driving forces behind Brexit, and they were seen as evil, far-right, nationalist, racist party. The media likes to overuse these terms a lot. So Tommy was an advisor for them. But in the same year, he was banned from Twitter for offensive language or inciting hatred or whatever reason they gave at the time. This was, of course, long before Twitter fell into Elon Musk. In 2019, he served 9 weeks of a 9-month sentence for previous contempt of court. And he actually attempted to run to be an EU parliamentarian. Though he didn't do very well. He got about 2.2% of the vote. He blamed the fact that he wasn't able to campaign on social media because he was effectively banned from social media at that time. And so he lost his deposit, and that was his attempts to get involved in more direct politics. In 2020, he was arrested again. As you can see, he has a bit of a checkered history. So this time he was arrested for violating COVID conditions. Basically, he held a rally at a time when you were allowed to be in a group of a maximum of 6 people. So, he was arrested for that. Apparently, he was involved in helping to launch something called the Hearts of Oak with Carl Benjamin. Carl Benjamin, he's kind of a figure on the, like a philosophical right figure, who he appears on Lotus Eaters, for example, and he's someone that, very academic, very interesting to listen to. And this Hearts of Oak, it was some kind of, what do they call it, a cultural movement. So not a political party, but a cultural movement. Yes, 2021, again, I don't know a lot about this incident, but apparently there was some reporter that was kind of going after Tommy, or trying to report on Tommy, might be a fairer way of putting it, saying that he was misusing donations. And he would show up at this reporter's house. He made accusations against the partner of this reporter being some kind of paedophile. I don't think those were verified. So he ended up getting a restraining order to stay away from that situation. 2022 is when he began to become more of a journalist. Some people dismiss his claims of being a journalist, but because he's hasn't got a degree in journalism. I don't think you require a degree. Okay, so at this point my selfie stick is just repeatedly trying to destroy this video. Yeah, so he made a series of documentaries about the grooming gangs. I haven't watched those earlier documentaries, I have to admit. I will try and get round to it at some point. But I've seen him speak a lot on the subject, so I'm not sure how much more I could learn, and I've watched, a lot of content about this. Okay, in 2023, he was arrested because he refused to leave a march. So there was a march against anti-Semitism, and he was covering this as a journalist. So it was him, a cameraman, and like a microphone guy, and the police said that his presence was not wanted by the organizers and that he was going to effectively end up stirring hatred. But he said, well, I'm just reporting on this as a journalist, I'm not causing any trouble. But the police still marched him out there and they pepper sprayed him in the face, which seemed to be quite, unnecessary, and you could say like an illegal action by the police. But of course the police, they're kind of above the law when it's suitable for them to be in the UK, especially if they're taking action against people that the government doesn't like. Let's say it that way. Okay, and then he was reinstated to Twitter, now called X, by Elon Musk. And this is when his latest controversial documentary, Silence, was released. And this is a documentary he made, and I have watched this documentary actually. It's one of the first things I kind of watched when I was researching Tommy Robinson, because I was curious about the sort of stuff he was saying and what all of the controversy was about. And this documentary was basically, so there was an incident in the UK, I don't remember the exact location or anything like that, but there was this school kid who was demonized in the media for waterboarding, or basically just pouring water over a Syrian refugee who was in place in one of the schools. And Tommy did a bit of digging into this because he felt that the media narrative was a bit biased. And he basically interviewed a load of people from the school, a load of the parents, some of the other children, and he put together a documentary about this, about his findings. And he maintained that actually the Syrian kid was very aggressive. He had hit, for example, a girl over her head with a hockey stick. He was very abusive to the other children, and the reason that this kid had poured the water of him because this Syrian kid had threatened to rape his sister or something like that. It's all in the documentary. I do recommend watching Silence. You can find it on X. And yeah, so he was taken to court for making this and accused of defamation and found guilty of defamation and forced to pay charges, but he refused to take the film down. And as a result, he was held in contempt of court and he went back to jail where he is now. So that's kind of, let's say, an overall history. Obviously, it doesn't cover everything about Tommy Robinson, but it does kind of give you paint a bit of a picture about the sort of person that I'm talking about here. So we're going to talk a little bit about his jail conditions. So actually, for the second time, he is being held in solitary confinement. They call it a segregated unit. And the reason for this is effectively they have housed him in a prison with a high radical Muslim population. that would effectively kill him if he was in public population. Of course, there's a lot of debate why he's in, because it's like HM Woodhill or something like that. Or anyway, he's in a very high security prison, and people are saying, well, he's guilty of contempt of court. Why is he in such an extreme prison to begin with? And he's basically spent all of this time in isolation, and it's debated how much freedom he has. If you listen to the official government report, it's like, oh, he's given like 3 hours out of his cell to go to the gym, to go for walks. He has full access to phones and communication. You know, he's like living a life of luxury in this prison. And then you hear the stories from him and the people that have visited him, the people that actually speak to him or try to. And what you find is actually the prison has refused a large number of visitations and actually cancelled a lot of these visitations at last minute. So he's not really getting like face-to-face contact with people. They've banned his phone privileges on many occasions. He is only able to eat, and this is the shocking thing for me, he's only able to eat tinned tuna and packets of crisps because it's other inmates who are preparing his food, and he's worried that he'll be poisoned. So that's another crazy one. Yeah, so it sounds like and also of course being in like solitary confinement, confined to a room for like 23 hours a day or something like that, it's triggering his like PTSD, and he has ADHD and stuff like that. All of this has been brought up in court because he's been trying to appeal his conditions. But of course the UK justice system is very much manipulated by is it like the Home Secretary or someone like that? Anyway, the UK government has made the choice that he'll be in prison and that he will have these conditions. So yeah, it depends what you choose to believe. I personally think that the version told by him and his friends is the more accurate one. And yeah, so in theory he'll be in jail for at least another few months, and we'll see what happens there. But I just want to kind of say a few final thoughts, and then we'll give this long video a rest. So it's interesting to note he has a number of supporters and a number of detractors. So the sort of people that I've seen lending him support, well, Elon Musk for one. He's like the most, you could say, high-profile support that Tommy's received, and he's the reason he's back on X and the reason that people can still watch Silenced, because Musk refuses to take it down despite court orders. He's supported by kind of academic figures like Jordan Peterson. In fact, I think there's an interview that Peterson has done with him that's rather infamous, so I recommend watching that. There are a number of like other kind of news channels that are quite close to Tommy. So Dan Wootton is one, Maya Tuzi is another, Paul Thorpe, and there are various kind of people in that circle who are big supporters of him. You have more controversial people like Katie Hopkins, who I guess has kind of been cancelled in a similar vein to Tommy. She's also seen as kind of a figure of the far right and of hatred. And then you have the people that really despise him. So the UK government actively hates Tommy. We'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. The BBC, Guardian, basically any mainstream newspaper, but especially those on the left, they really hate Tommy because he's very an opposite to their ethos, you could say. And actually, one of the funny things is the far right hates Tommy. And one thing to note is that Tommy, his following is not just like angry white people. He has a very multi-ethnic, multi-faith following. So he has, you know, a lot of people from the black community, a lot of people from like Sikh and Hindu communities. He even has a few kind of Muslim followers. Because the thing is that Tommy, he's not against, like, you know, he's not one of these like anti-immigration people. I mean, obviously to an extent he is, but what he sees is the kind of two-tier policing angle that we're seeing a lot in the UK. He's against the grooming of these girls, and grooming I use as a polite YouTube-friendly term. He's against the persecution of Jewish people. He's against the persecution of gay people. So you could say he's very much a kind of civil rights campaigner, trying to stand up for a number of oppressed people who are being oppressed by a minority, if you'll believe the statistics. So those are kind of my views on, yeah. And like the thing is, he has a lot of power in that he has a large following, and if he was to hold a rally, he could probably conjure up about 50,000 people to show up. And this is one of the reasons the establishment are kind of afraid of him, because he's one of those voices that stands up against the establishment and the kind of woke dogma that has infiltrated these institutions. And ironically, he has become a very strong example of what you would consider two-tier justice, because there are people that have done far worse than him on the left that have had no sentence at all. Okay, any other things worth mentioning? So there's a big controversy with Reform UK, where Nigel Farage, leader of Reform UK, is very anti-Tommy, and he has said a number of things, a number of them false, accusing him of attacking women and stuff like that, which never happened. I think Nigel has softened his rhetoric once he realised he was isolating a lot of his voters. But yeah, a lot of people that have supported Tommy publicly have been kicked out of Reform UK as a result, including people like Rupert Lowe, Howard Cox, because he's seen as too toxic to be involved with the party. Not he's ever asked to be involved in Reform UK, but the very idea that his name could be associated, it's too evil. Yeah, and one thing I'll say about Tommy, just to round off the video, is when you do watch him talk, he is a very good storyteller. I guess partly because he's like half Irish. I think his mother's Irish. And so he tells you a lot of very vivid stories about his life, what he's witnessed, and he really does paint a very like powerful picture. So I'm just going to finish this video by saying, obviously this isn't my usual content, but it's something I wanted to talk about. The fact that like Dominik Tarczyński, visited Tommy this week, gave me the kind of link between Poland and Tommy to actually justify the existence of this video on this channel. But I do recommend that you, say, watch his Oxford Union speech, or watch one of the many interviews you'll see with him online, and make up your own opinion, because obviously, you know, I'm not telling you what to think. Personally, I think if you are under the impression that he's some kind of evil bigot, I think you're falling for mainstream media lies and demonization, which we're seeing all too much in the West right now. So I recommend you see some of your interviews himself and form your own opinion. One interesting thing that's said is when people are asked to provide an example of something racist he has said, they can never find a quote or anything. And he maintains the same kind of rhetoric even from his youth to now. And it's something that he's proud of, to say that he's not a racist and he hates being accused of that. But anyway, do your own research. These are my thoughts based on what I've seen. I hope you found the video interesting, and at least try and be nice in the comments. Rude, because there are a lot of people in this world who are very rude, and I don't personally think have souls, who will, instantly demonize everything I say because of the content of this message. But anyway, thank you for watching. We'll go back to Poland in next week's video. Do zobaczenia.